The scream that tore through the mountain cabin in the Colorado Rockies during the winter of 1876 was followed by a silence so profound that Jeremiah Blackwood felt his heart stop beating in his massive chest. He stood outside in the biting February cold, his broad shoulders dusted with snow, his calloused hands gripping the porch railing hard enough to splinter the wood. Inside, his wife Sarah was bringing their third child into the world, and something had gone terribly wrong. He could hear the midwife's urgent whispers, the shuffling of feet, and then another cry from Sarah that made him want to tear the door off its hinges and storm inside. But he had been ordered to stay out, and so he waited, his breath forming clouds in the frozen air, his long, dark hair whipping around his weathered face. The door finally creaked open, and Mrs. Henderson, the midwife from the settlement 10 miles down the mountain, stepped out onto the porch. Her face was pale, her hands trembling as she wiped them on her apron. Blood stained the fabric, and Jeremiah's stomach dropped. "Your wife is alive," Mrs. Henderson said quickly, seeing the panic in his steel-gray eyes, "and you have a healthy son." Jeremiah let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. "Then what is wrong? Why do you look like death itself has visited?" The midwife glanced back at the door, then met his gaze with obvious reluctance. "Mr. Blackwood, your wife lost a great deal of blood, more than I have ever seen a woman lose and survive. Her body has been through too much trauma. I need to tell you something, and you need to understand the gravity of it." "Speak plainly, woman," Jeremiah growled, though fear made his voice rough rather than anger. "She cannot have more children," Mrs. Henderson said, her words coming out in a rush. "If she gets pregnant again, it will kill her. I am certain of it. The damage to her body is too severe. 3 births in 5 years, and this last one nearly took her from you. You must not share a bed with her in that way again, Mr. Blackwood. Do you understand what I'm saying?" Jeremiah stared at the midwife for a long moment, processing her words. Then, without warning, he pushed past her and into the cabin. The main room was warm from the fire blazing in the stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across the log walls. He crossed the space in 3 long strides, his boots heavy on the wooden floor, and entered the bedroom where Sarah lay in their bed. She looked impossibly small and fragile against the white sheets, her blonde hair damp with sweat and plastered to her forehead. Her face was the color of fresh snow, and dark circles shadowed her blue eyes. But when she saw him, she smiled, and Jeremiah felt something crack open in his chest. In her arms, wrapped in a quilt Sarah had sewn during the long winter months, was their newborn son. The baby was red-faced and tiny, with a shock of dark hair just like his father's. "Jeremiah," Sarah whispered, her voice weak but filled with joy, "look at him. Is he not perfect?" Jeremiah sat on the edge of the bed, the frame creaking under his weight. He was a large man, 6 feet 4 inches of solid muscle built from years of trapping, hunting, and surviving in the harsh mountain wilderness. His hands, scarred from countless encounters with nature and beast, reached out to gently touch his son's cheek. "He is perfect," Jeremiah agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "Just like his mother." Sarah's smile faltered. "You heard what Mrs. Henderson said." "I heard." "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered, tears filling her eyes. "I know you wanted a large family. I know I have failed you." Jeremiah's head snapped up, and he fixed his wife with a fierce look. "You have not failed me in anything, Sarah Blackwood. Do you hear me? Not in one single thing." "But the children," Sarah protested weakly. "You always said you wanted a house full." "The ones we have are plenty," Jeremiah said firmly, reaching out to cup her pale face in his large hand. "You, Emma, Daniel, and now this little man. That is all I need in this world. That is more than I ever dreamed I would have." Sarah's tears spilled over, running down her cheeks. "You truly mean that?" "With every breath in my body," Jeremiah promised. He leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Now rest. I will take care of everything." Mrs. Henderson appeared in the doorway, her expression softer now. "I will stay for a few days to make sure Mrs. Blackwood recovers properly. You have 2 other children who will need tending while their mother heals." Jeremiah nodded. "Emma is 5, and Daniel just turned 3. They are good children, but they will be excited about their new brother." As if summoned by his words, there was a commotion in the main room. The front door banged open, and Jeremiah heard his daughter's voice calling out, "Papa! Papa! We are home!" Jeremiah stood and walked back into the main room just as Emma burst through the door, her cheeks pink from the cold, her brown eyes bright with excitement. Behind her, their neighbor Tom Sullivan carried Daniel, who was bundled up so completely in furs that only his eyes were visible. "I heard the baby!" Emma exclaimed, rushing toward her father. "Is Mama all right? Do I have a brother or a sister?" Jeremiah caught his daughter and lifted her into his arms, though she was getting big for such treatment. "Your Mama is fine, and you have a baby brother." Emma let out a squeal of delight. Daniel, now set down by Tom, waddled forward and raised his arms to his father. Jeremiah somehow managed to hold both of them, his powerful arms easily supporting their weight. "Can we see them?" Emma asked eagerly. "In a moment. Your Mama needs to rest, and the baby is very small. You must be gentle and quiet." Tom Sullivan, a lean man in his 40s who ran a small ranch in the valley below, cleared his throat. "I will head back now that I know all is well. Mrs. Sullivan was worried when we saw the midwife's horse this morning." "Thank you for watching the children," Jeremiah said sincerely. "I am in your debt." Tom waved a hand dismissively. "Neighbors help neighbors. That is how we survive out here. You have done plenty for us over the years." He tipped his hat and headed back out into the cold. Jeremiah set his children down and knelt before them, his large frame still towering over their small forms. "Listen to me now. Your Mama has been through something very difficult. She's going to need lots of rest and quiet. Can you two be helpful and good?" Emma nodded solemnly, her small face serious. "I will help with everything, Papa. I can cook and clean like Mama taught me." "Me too," Daniel piped up, though he could barely reach the wash basin. Jeremiah felt a swell of pride for his children. "Good. Now come meet your brother. But remember to be quiet." He led them into the bedroom, where Sarah was now sitting up slightly, the baby still cradled in her arms. Emma approached slowly, her eyes wide with wonder. Daniel climbed up onto the bed with his mother's encouraging smile, peering at the tiny bundle. "He's so small," Emma breathed. "What is his name?" Jeremiah and Sarah exchanged a look. They had discussed names during the pregnancy, but now, seeing his wife's pale face and knowing what she had endured, Jeremiah felt the name they had chosen was perfect. "His name is Samuel," Sarah said softly. "Samuel Nathaniel Blackwood." "After Mama's father," Emma said, remembering the stories Sarah had told about her family back east. "That is right," Sarah confirmed. "Would you like to touch his hand?" Emma reached out with one small finger and gently touched the baby's tiny fist. Samuel's fingers immediately closed around hers, and Emma gasped with delight. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Mrs. Henderson stayed true to her word, remaining at the cabin to care for Sarah and the baby, while Jeremiah managed the household and tended to Emma and Daniel. It was exhausting work, and Jeremiah gained a new appreciation for everything his wife did to keep their home running smoothly. He chopped wood to keep the fires burning against the February cold. He melted snow for water and hauled it inside in heavy buckets. He cooked simple meals of venison stew and cornbread, though his efforts were nowhere near as good as Sarah's cooking. He changed Daniel's clothes when the boy spilled his dinner down his front. He braided Emma's hair each morning, his large fingers fumbling with the delicate strands until she giggled and helped him. And through it all, he watched his wife slowly regain her strength. The color gradually returned to her cheeks. She was able to sit up without feeling dizzy. She nursed baby Samuel and sang to him in her sweet voice. But Jeremiah also saw the sadness in her eyes when she thought no one was looking, and he knew she was still troubled by Mrs. Henderson's pronouncement. On the fourth day, Mrs. Henderson prepared to leave. The weather had cleared, and she needed to return to her own family. Before she departed, she pulled Jeremiah aside. "Your wife is recovering well, but she is still weak. She should not be doing heavy work for at least another month. And Mr. Blackwood," she paused, her expression grave, "I meant what I said. Another pregnancy would kill her. You must be careful." "I understand," Jeremiah said quietly. "Thank you for everything you have done for my family." After Mrs. Henderson left, Jeremiah found himself standing in the doorway of the bedroom, watching Sarah nurse Samuel. Emma was sitting on the bed beside her mother, chattering about the snow fort she wanted to build when the weather warmed. Daniel was napping on a pile of furs in the corner, snoring softly. Sarah looked up and caught Jeremiah's eye. She smiled, but it did not quite reach her eyes. That evening, after the children were all asleep, Jeremiah and Sarah sat together by the fire. It was the first time they had been truly alone since Samuel's birth. Sarah was wrapped in a thick blanket, still recovering her strength, and Jeremiah had pulled his chair close to hers. "You have been avoiding talking to me," Sarah said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence. "I have been busy keeping the children alive and the house from falling apart," Jeremiah replied with a slight smile. "You know what I mean." Sarah turned to face him, the firelight casting shadows across her delicate features. "About what Mrs. Henderson said." Jeremiah reached over and took his wife's hand, engulfing her small fingers in his large palm. "There's nothing to discuss. I told you how I feel." "But surely you must have doubts," Sarah insisted. "You came from a large family. You always spoke of wanting many children running around this cabin." It was true that Jeremiah had grown up as one of 8 children in a rowdy household back in Missouri. His mother had managed them all with a firm hand and endless patience. When he had married Sarah 5 years ago, he had imagined a similar future for himself. But that was before he had truly understood what pregnancy and childbirth took from a woman. It was before he had watched Sarah suffer through morning sickness so severe she could barely keep down water. Before he had seen her exhausted and aching as her body changed and grew. Before he had paced outside while she screamed in labor, feeling utterly helpless. "I was young and foolish when I said those things," Jeremiah said slowly. "I did not understand what I was asking of you. Watching you go through this 3 times has taught me the true cost of bringing life into this world. It is not a cost I am willing to ask you to pay again." "But you are such a good father," Sarah whispered. "The children adore you. Samuel will grow up strong and brave like his papa." "And Emma is already showing signs of having your kindness and intelligence," Jeremiah countered. "Daniel has your smile and your gentle heart. They are all perfect, Sarah. 3 children are not too few. Many families out here have fewer. Some have none at all." Sarah was quiet for a moment, staring into the flames. "Do you remember when we first met?" she asked suddenly. Jeremiah smiled at the memory. "I remember a stubborn woman who insisted she could make it through the mountain pass alone, despite the storm clouds gathering overhead." "I was not stubborn. I was determined," Sarah corrected with a hint of her old spirit. "I had come all the way from Pennsylvania to start a new life in Colorado, and I was not going to be stopped by a little weather." "It was not a little weather. It was a blizzard that trapped us in a cave for 2 days," Jeremiah reminded her. He could still picture it clearly. It had been late October of 1870, and he had been returning from a trapping expedition when he encountered a wagon struggling along the mountain trail. The driver had been an older man who had agreed to transport Sarah and her meager belongings to the mining town of Silver Creek, where she had hoped to find work as a schoolteacher. But the man had been drunk, Jeremiah had realized immediately. The wagon was weaving dangerously close to the cliff edge, and when Jeremiah had called out a warning, the driver had spooked the horses. Everything had happened so fast. The wagon had tipped, spilling Sarah and her belongings across the trail. The drunk driver had managed to stay on the seat and, in a panic, had whipped the horses into a run, disappearing down the mountain and leaving Sarah alone. Jeremiah had immediately gone to help her. She had been shaken but uninjured, though her few possessions were scattered across the rocks. He had helped her gather everything, and then he had looked at the sky and known they were in trouble. "I told you we needed to find shelter immediately," Jeremiah said, continuing the memory, "and you argued with me that we could make it to the town before the storm hit." "I did not want to be improper," Sarah said softly. "A young, unmarried woman alone with a strange man. I knew what people would say. And I told you that people would say a lot worse if they found your frozen body in the spring thaw." Sarah laughed quietly. "You were very persuasive and intimidating. I had never seen a man so large and wild-looking. Your hair was even longer then, and you had that thick beard." "I was not trying to intimidate you," Jeremiah said. "I was trying to save your life." He had practically dragged her to a cave he knew was nearby, a place he had used for shelter before. They had barely made it inside before the snow began to fall in thick, heavy flakes. Within an hour, the world outside the cave was a white blur of wind and ice. They had been trapped there for 2 days while the storm raged. Jeremiah had built a fire and shared his provisions. They had talked to pass the time, and Jeremiah had discovered that Sarah was 21 years old, orphaned when her parents died of fever, and determined to make her own way in the world rather than accept the charity of distant relatives. She had been brave and smart and beautiful, and by the time the storm cleared, Jeremiah had known he wanted to marry her. "You proposed to me before we even left that cave," Sarah remembered, her eyes soft with memory. "You said you needed a wife, and I needed a home, and we would be practical about it." "I was not good with romantic words then," Jeremiah admitted. "I am still not." "But you were romantic in your actions," Sarah said. "You spent 3 weeks building furniture for the cabin before you brought me here as your bride. You wanted everything to be perfect. You picked wildflowers and put them in a jar on the table. You were so nervous during the wedding ceremony that you nearly dropped the ring." "Reverend Mitchell's hands were shaking worse than mine," Jeremiah defended himself. "It was freezing in that church." "It was September," Sarah laughed. "It was perfectly pleasant." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, both lost in memories. Sarah's hand was still in Jeremiah's, and he rubbed his thumb gently across her knuckles. "I have been happy," Sarah said finally. "These 5 years with you have been the happiest of my life. Even with the hardships and the isolation and the difficult winters, you have given me a home and a family and love. I do not want you to think I regret anything." "I do not think that," Jeremiah assured her. "But I need you to believe me when I say that I am content. 3 children are enough. 3 children are more than enough. You are enough, Sarah. You have always been enough." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "I love you, Jeremiah Blackwood. And I love you, Sarah Blackwood, more than I can ever find the words to say." He leaned over and kissed her gently, mindful of her still recovering body. When they parted, Sarah rested her head on his broad shoulder, and they sat together by the fire until they both fell asleep in their chairs. The weeks that followed were challenging, but also filled with moments of joy. Samuel was a good baby, alert and healthy, and he grew stronger each day. Emma took her role as big sister very seriously, always eager to help with the baby. Daniel was less interested in the infant and more concerned with when he would be able to play with his new brother. Jeremiah fell into a routine of caring for his family while also maintaining his traplines and hunting to provide meat for the table. It was exhausting work, especially with Sarah still recovering, but he never complained. Every evening he would return to the cabin to find his wife growing stronger, his children thriving, and he would feel a deep sense of gratitude for what he had. But he could see that Sarah was still struggling with the midwife's declaration. She would sometimes grow quiet and distant, lost in her own thoughts. Once he found her crying in the bedroom while holding Samuel, though she would not tell him what was wrong. It was nearly a month after Samuel's birth when everything came to a head. Jeremiah had gone into the settlement to trade some furs and purchase supplies. When he returned in the late afternoon, he found Sarah in the kitchen, attempting to knead bread dough despite her obvious exhaustion. "Sarah, what are you doing?" Jeremiah demanded, dropping his pack and crossing to her side. "You are supposed to be resting." "I'm tired of resting," Sarah said, her voice sharp with frustration. "I'm tired of being weak and useless. I need to be taking care of my family." "You are taking care of the family," Jeremiah said, gently taking the dough from her hands. "You are feeding our son and loving our children. That is the most important thing you can do right now." "But you are doing everything else," Sarah protested. "The cooking and cleaning and caring for Emma and Daniel, it is not right. It is not how things should be." "Sarah, you nearly died," Jeremiah said bluntly. "Do you understand that?" Mrs. Henderson was not exaggerating. "You lost so much blood that your heart almost stopped. I know you are used to being strong and capable, but you need to let yourself heal." "I am healed enough," Sarah insisted stubbornly. "You are pale and shaking just from kneading dough," Jeremiah pointed out. "Sit down before you fall down." Sarah's eyes flashed with anger, but before she could respond, her knees buckled. Jeremiah caught her instantly, his strong arms supporting her weight as if she weighed nothing at all. He carried her to the bedroom and laid her gently on the bed. "Stay there," he ordered. "I will finish the bread and make dinner. Emma can watch the boys." But as he turned to leave, Sarah grabbed his hand. "Jeremiah, wait. Please." He turned back to find her crying, tears streaming down her face. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I am so sorry." Jeremiah sat on the edge of the bed and pulled his wife into his arms, holding her while she sobbed against his chest. "What are you sorry for?" "For being broken," Sarah choked out, "for not being the wife you need, for not being able to give you more children, for being so weak and pathetic." "Stop," Jeremiah said firmly. He pulled back and cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. "Listen to me, Sarah. You're not broken. You're not weak or pathetic. You're the strongest woman I have ever known. You came west alone with nothing but determination and courage. You have built a home with me in this harsh wilderness. You have brought 3 beautiful children into the world. You are everything I need and more." "But I cannot give you more children," Sarah repeated, the words coming out as a wail. "I do not want more children," Jeremiah said, his voice intense. "I want you, alive and healthy and with me. That is all I want, Sarah. That is all I have ever wanted." "But your family," Sarah protested weakly. "You came from such a large family." "And I watched my mother work herself to the bone raising all of us," Jeremiah said quietly. "I watched her grow old before her time. I watched her bury 2 of my siblings who did not survive past infancy. I loved my childhood, but I do not need to recreate it. I am making my own family now, with you, and it is perfect just as it is." Sarah searched his face, looking for any sign of doubt or resentment, but all she saw was love and sincerity in his steel-gray eyes. "You truly mean that," she whispered. "You are not just saying it to make me feel better." "I have never lied to you," Jeremiah said. "I am not about to start now. 3 children are plenty. The ones we have are plenty. You are plenty. You are everything." Sarah threw her arms around his neck and held him tight, burying her face in his shoulder. Jeremiah held her close, one large hand cradling the back of her head, the other wrapped around her still fragile body. "I love you," Sarah whispered against his neck. "I love you so much." "I love you too," Jeremiah murmured, "more than life itself." They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other while the afternoon light faded outside. Eventually, Emma peeked her head into the room, Daniel clinging to her skirt. "Papa, is Mama all right? She is crying." Jeremiah looked up and smiled at his daughter. "Your mama is fine, little one. She just needed a good cry. Sometimes that helps make people feel better." Emma considered this seriously, then nodded. "Can we have dinner soon? Daniel says his tummy is growling like a bear." "It is," Daniel confirmed solemnly, rubbing his stomach. Jeremiah laughed and gently released Sarah. "I will make dinner right now. Why do you 2 go play quietly in the main room?" After the children scampered away, Sarah wiped her eyes and looked at her husband. "Thank you," she said softly, "for being patient with me, for loving me even when I'm difficult." "You are never difficult," Jeremiah said. "You are just stubborn, which is one of the things I love about you." Sarah laughed, and it was the first genuine laugh Jeremiah had heard from her since before Samuel's birth. The sound filled him with relief and joy. Over the next few weeks, Sarah continued to grow stronger. She began to take on more of the household tasks again, though Jeremiah made sure she did not push herself too hard. They fell into a new rhythm, working together to care for their 3 children and maintain their mountain home. One evening in late March, after the children were all asleep, Jeremiah and Sarah sat together on the porch, despite the lingering cold. The stars were brilliant overhead, and the moon cast silver light across the snow-covered peaks surrounding their cabin. "I have been thinking," Sarah said, breaking the peaceful silence, "about the future." Jeremiah waited, knowing his wife would continue when she was ready. "Emma will be starting her lessons soon. She is so bright and eager to learn. I want to make sure she has opportunities, even out here in the wilderness. We can order books from the settlements," Jeremiah suggested. "I know you wanted to be a teacher. You can teach her everything you know. And Daniel will need to learn as well when he is ready, and eventually Samuel. You will be a wonderful teacher to all of them. Jeremiah said confidently. Sarah was quiet for a moment, then said, I think I have finally accepted it, that we will not have more children. It makes me sad sometimes, but I'm also grateful for what we have. You were right, Jeremiah. The ones we have are plenty. They are more than enough to fill my heart and my days. Jeremiah reached over and took her hand. I am glad you have found peace with it. But Sarah, I want you to know something. Even if we had no children at all, I would still consider myself the luckiest man alive. Because I have you. Sarah smiled and squeezed his hand. You have such a way with words when you try. Only with you, Jeremiah said. Only ever with you. They sat together under the stars, hand in hand, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life together in the rugged wilderness. And in that moment, everything felt exactly as it should be. As spring arrived in the mountains, bringing warmer weather and melting snow, the Blackwood family began to venture outside more. Emma helped her father plant a vegetable garden, carefully placing seeds in the soil under his watchful eye. Daniel toddled around the clearing in front of the cabin, discovering rocks and sticks and all manner of fascinating things. Sarah sat on the porch with Samuel in her arms, her strength fully returned now, watching her family with contentment. Jeremiah had never been happier. His traplines were productive, providing good furs to trade. His family was healthy and thriving. His wife smiled more each day, the shadow of sadness finally lifting from her eyes. One afternoon in early April, Jeremiah returned from checking his traps to find visitors at the cabin. Tom Sullivan and his wife Margaret had ridden up with their two sons, bringing fresh eggs and news from the settlement. There is talk of building a proper schoolhouse in the valley, Margaret was telling Sarah as Jeremiah approached. They want to hire a teacher for the children in the area. I immediately thought of you, Sarah. I know you were trained as a teacher back east. Sarah's face lit up with interest. A schoolhouse? That would be wonderful for Emma and the other children. They are looking for someone to start in the fall, Tom added. It would not pay much, but it would be steady work if you are interested. Jeremiah saw the excitement in his wife's eyes and smiled. It sounds like a good opportunity, he said. Though we would need to figure out the logistics, the cabin is a fair distance from the valley. What if we built a smaller place down in the settlement? Sarah suggested, her mind already working through the possibilities. Nothing fancy, just a small cabin we could stay in during the week when I'm teaching. Then we could come back up here on weekends. That's a lot of traveling back and forth, Jeremiah said thoughtfully. Or, Sarah continued, warming to the idea, we could think about eventually moving down to the valley. Not right away, but maybe in a year or two. It would be easier for the children as they get older. They would have other children to play with and learn with. Jeremiah felt a twinge at the thought of leaving their mountain cabin, the home he had built with his own hands. But he also recognized the wisdom in Sarah's words. The isolated life was good for him, but his children would benefit from being part of a community. We can discuss it, he said finally. But first, let us get through this summer and see how things go. Margaret clapped her hands together. Oh, I am so excited. The children will love having you as their teacher, Sarah. You are so patient and kind. After the Sullivans left, Sarah turned to Jeremiah with shining eyes. Could you imagine? Me actually teaching like I always dreamed. I can imagine it very easily, Jeremiah said, pulling her close. You will be wonderful at it. It would mean changes, Sarah warned. Our life would not be as simple and quiet as it has been. Life is always changing, Jeremiah replied. The important thing is that we face those changes together. Sarah stood on her toes and kissed him, and Jeremiah marveled again at how lucky he was to have found this woman. The summer of 1876 passed in a blur of activity and happiness. Sarah worked on her lesson plans for the potential teaching position, borrowing books from the few families in the area and preparing materials. Emma helped her mother, fascinated by the idea of a real school. Daniel grew from a toddler into a rambunctious little boy who was constantly getting into mischief. And Samuel began to smile and coo, his personality emerging more each day. Jeremiah built a small barn to house the two horses and cow they had acquired over the years. He repaired the roof of the cabin and reinforced the walls against the coming winter. He hunted deer and elk, smoking the meat to preserve it. and every evening he would come home to find his family waiting for him, and his heart would feel full to bursting. In August, word came that the schoolhouse had been completed, and Sarah was officially offered the teaching position. She accepted with joy and some trepidation, knowing it would be a significant change for their family. "We will make it work," Jeremiah assured her. "I can help with the children when you are teaching, and Emma is old enough now to help watch her brothers for short periods." "Are you sure you do not mind?" Sarah asked. "I know this is not what you imagined when you married a wife." "I imagined marrying a strong, intelligent woman who would be my partner in all things," Jeremiah said. "That is exactly what I got. If teaching makes you happy, then it makes me happy." Sarah hugged him tightly. "Have I told you lately that you are the best husband in the entire territory?" "You may have mentioned it once or twice," Jeremiah said with a grin, "but I never get tired of hearing it." The decision was made to spend weekdays in the valley during the school term, staying in a small cabin that the settlement agreed to provide for the teacher. On weekends and during school breaks, they would return to their mountain home. It was not a perfect solution, but it would work. As fall approached and the aspen trees turned gold on the mountainsides, Sarah prepared for her first day of teaching. She was nervous but excited, her old dream finally coming true. Jeremiah watched her lay out her best dress the night before, practicing what she would say to her students, and he fell in love with her all over again. "You are going to be magnificent," he told her. "What if the children do not like me?" Sarah worried. "What if I'm not good at this?" "The children will love you," Jeremiah said firmly, "just like our children love you, just like I love you. You have a gift for making people feel safe and valued. That is what makes a great teacher." The first day of school arrived with a beautiful September morning. Sarah wore her blue dress with the white collar, her hair pinned up neatly. She looked young and pretty and nervous as she gathered her materials. "I will walk you to the schoolhouse," Jeremiah said, even though it was only a short distance from the cabin where they were staying. "You do not have to," Sarah protested. "You have work to do." "Nothing is more important than this," Jeremiah insisted. "This is a big day. I'm going to be there for it." So they walked together to the small log building that served as the schoolhouse, Emma skipping ahead of them in her excitement at starting proper lessons. Jeremiah carried Samuel in a sling across his broad chest, while Daniel held his father's hand. Inside, several families had already arrived with their children. Jeremiah recognized Tom and Margaret Sullivan with their 2 boys. There was the Johnsons family with their 4 children and the Prescott family with their 3. In all, there were about 15 children ranging in age from 5 to 13. Sarah took a deep breath and stepped forward, introducing herself to the families. Jeremiah watched with pride as his shy wife transformed into a confident teacher, welcoming each child and making them feel comfortable. When it was time for the parents to leave, Jeremiah squeezed Sarah's hand. "You're going to do wonderfully," he whispered. "Thank you for believing in me," Sarah whispered back. Jeremiah left with the other parents, taking Daniel and Samuel back to their cabin. He spent the day caring for the boys and working on various tasks around the settlement. When the school day ended, he was waiting outside the schoolhouse to walk Sarah home. "How was it?" he asked eagerly as she emerged, looking tired but happy. "It was wonderful," Sarah said, her face glowing. "The children were so eager to learn, and Emma did beautifully. I was worried about showing favoritism to my own daughter, but she was just another student, following the rules and doing her work." "I knew you would be perfect at this," Jeremiah said, wrapping his free arm around her while still holding Samuel with the other. That evening, as they sat together in the small cabin, Sarah talked excitedly about her students and her plans for the coming weeks. Jeremiah listened with a smile, loving the passion and joy in her voice. "Thank you," Sarah said suddenly, interrupting her own stream of words, "for supporting this, for being willing to uproot our life so I could chase this dream." "It is not uprooting our life," Jeremiah corrected. "It is expanding it. And besides, your dreams are my dreams now. That is what marriage means." Sarah leaned over and kissed him softly. "How did I get so lucky?" "I ask myself the same question every day," Jeremiah replied. The school year progressed smoothly. Sarah quickly became beloved by her students and their families. She was patient but firm, kind but demanding. The children flourished under her instruction, and parents commented on how much their children were learning. Jeremiah settled into his new routine. He spent his days hunting and trapping, but now he also helped with the children more, giving Sarah time to prepare lessons and grade assignments. He discovered that he enjoyed being more involved in the daily care of his children, seeing their personalities develop and their interests emerge. Emma was definitely her mother's daughter, with a love of books and learning. Daniel was more like Jeremiah, happiest when he was outside exploring and getting dirty. And Samuel was developing into a cheerful baby who rarely cried and seemed to find joy in everything. On weekends, they would return to their mountain cabin, and those days felt like a precious reprieve from the busy week. Jeremiah would take Emma and Daniel on short hikes, teaching them about the plants and animals of the mountains. Sarah would catch up on household tasks while Samuel napped. In the evenings, they would all gather by the fire, telling stories and singing songs. Winter arrived early that year, with the first heavy snows falling in October. The school continued despite the cold, and Jeremiah made sure the schoolhouse always had plenty of wood for the stove. He would arrive early each morning to start the fire, so the building would be warm when Sarah and the children arrived. One particularly cold day in December, Jeremiah was chopping wood outside the cabin when he heard horses approaching. He looked up to see a group of riders, and his hand instinctively moved to the rifle leaning against the cabin wall. Strangers could mean trouble, especially in the harsh winter months when desperation sometimes drove men to violence. But as the riders drew closer, Jeremiah recognized the lead man as Sheriff Coleman from the nearby town of Silver Creek. The sheriff was an older man with a weathered face and a reputation for fairness. "Jeremiah Blackwood?" the sheriff called out. That is me," Jeremiah confirmed, relaxing slightly but staying alert. "What can I do for you, Sheriff?" "We are tracking a group of outlaws who robbed a bank in Silver Creek 3 days ago," Sheriff Coleman explained. 4 men, heavily armed and dangerous. We think they headed into the mountains to hide. I am warning all the families in the area to be on alert." Jeremiah felt his jaw tighten. "How dangerous are we talking?" "They killed a clerk during the robbery," the sheriff said grimly. "They will not hesitate to hurt anyone who gets in their way. Keep your doors locked and your weapons closed. If you see anything suspicious, ride into town immediately." After the sheriff and his men rode off to warn other families, Jeremiah went inside to find Sarah nursing Samuel while Emma practiced her letters at the table. Daniel was napping on the bed in the corner. "We need to talk," Jeremiah said quietly. Sarah looked up and immediately saw the concern on his face. "What is wrong?" Jeremiah explained about the outlaws, watching Sarah's face pale. "I want you and the children to stay inside unless I'm with you," he said firmly. "No going to the schoolhouse alone. No walking anywhere without me." "Do you think they would come here?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I do not know," Jeremiah admitted, "but I'm not taking any chances. You and the children are too precious to me." For the next few days, Jeremiah did not let his family out of his sight. He escorted Sarah to the schoolhouse each morning and picked her up each afternoon. He kept his rifle loaded and within reach at all times. He barely slept, listening for any sound of trouble outside. The tension was exhausting for everyone. Emma sensed her parents' fear and became clingy. Daniel had nightmares and would wake crying in the night. Even baby Samuel seemed to pick up on the stress, fussing more than usual. On the 4th day after the sheriff's visit, Jeremiah was outside checking on the horses when he heard Sarah scream from inside the cabin. He grabbed his rifle and burst through the door, his heart pounding with terror. Inside, he found Sarah backing away from one of the windows, her face white with fear. "I saw someone," she gasped, "a man watching the cabin from the trees." Jeremiah rushed to the window, peering out carefully. At first, he saw nothing but the snowy forest. Then he caught a glimpse of movement, a flash of dark clothing between the trees. "Get the children into the back room," Jeremiah ordered, his voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Bar the door and do not come out until I tell you it is safe." "Jeremiah, no," Sarah protested. "Do not go out there. We should all hide." "If they are out there watching us, hiding will not help," Jeremiah said grimly. "I need to confront them while I have the advantage. Now go, protect our children." Sarah grabbed Emma and Daniel, scooping up Samuel from his cradle. She herded them into the small back room that served as storage, and Jeremiah heard the bar slide into place on the door. He moved to the front door, rifle ready, and stepped out onto the porch. The cold air bit at his face, and his breath formed clouds in front of him. "I know you are out there," Jeremiah called out, his deep voice carrying across the clearing. "Show yourself, or I start shooting at shadows." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a man stepped out from behind a large pine tree. He was thin and haggard-looking, with a scraggly beard and wild eyes. His hands were raised, showing he was not holding a weapon, but Jeremiah could see a gun belt around his waist. "Easy there, friend," the man said. "I do not mean any trouble." "Then why are you sneaking around my property?" Jeremiah demanded, keeping his rifle trained on the stranger. "I was just passing through," the man said. "Saw your cabin and thought maybe you could spare some food. I have not eaten in days." Jeremiah did not believe him for a second. This man matched the description the sheriff had given of one of the outlaws. "You are a long way from any main trail," he observed. "Strange place to just be passing through." The man's eyes darted nervously. "I got lost in the storm a few days back. Been wandering ever since." "You are lying," Jeremiah said flatly. "You are one of the men who robbed the bank in Silver Creek." The man's friendly expression dropped, replaced by something harder and more dangerous. "And if I am? You going to shoot me?" "If I have to," Jeremiah said, "but I would rather you just ride out of here and leave my family alone." "See, that is a problem," the man said, "because me and my partners need supplies, and you have a nice little setup here. Food, shelter, horses. We will be taking those." "Like hell you will," Jeremiah growled. 3 more men emerged from the trees surrounding the cabin. They all had guns drawn, and Jeremiah realized with a sinking feeling that he was outmanned and outgunned. We do not want to hurt nobody," one of the new men said. He was older than the others, with a scar running down his left cheek. "Just give us what we need, and we will be on our way." Jeremiah thought quickly. He could not shoot all 4 men before they shot him, and if he went down, there would be nothing protecting Sarah and the children. He needed to buy time and hope that someone would come along or that he could get an advantage somehow. "Supplies are in the barn," Jeremiah said, lowering his rifle slightly. "Take what you need and go." "And the horses," the scarred man said. "No," Jeremiah said firmly. "You can have food and some blankets, but not the horses. My family needs them to survive out here." "You are not in a position to negotiate," the first man sneered. "Jad, and you are not in a position to fight," Jeremiah countered. "I can drop at least 2 of you before you take me down, and the gunshots will bring every man in the valley running. The sheriff is already looking for you. Do you really want to add murdering a family to your crimes?" The men exchanged uncertain looks. They clearly had not expected resistance, and Jeremiah's calm confidence was unnerving them. "He has a point," one of the younger outlaws said nervously. "We should just take what we can and get out of here." "Shut up," the scarred man snapped. Then, to Jeremiah, "Fine, show us the supplies." Jeremiah carefully made his way to the barn, the 4 outlaws following him with their guns drawn. His mind was racing, trying to figure out how to get out of this situation without anyone getting hurt. Inside the barn, he pointed to the sacks of flour and dried beans stacked in the corner. "Take what you can carry." While the men were busy gathering supplies, Jeremiah noticed one of the outlaws eyeing the horses hungrily. "I said no horses," Jeremiah repeated firmly. "We need a way to get out of these mountains," the man argued. "We will freeze to death otherwise." "Not my problem," Jeremiah said coldly. "You made your choices. Deal with the consequences." The scarred man suddenly lunged forward, pressing his gun against Jeremiah's chest. "Listen here, mountain man. You are trying my patience. We are taking the horses, and if you do not like it, I will put a bullet in you and take what I want from your widow." Rage flooded through Jeremiah at the threat to Sarah. Before he could think better of it, his hand shot out and grabbed the man's wrist, twisting hard. The gun went off with a deafening bang, but the shot went wild, slamming into the barn wall. Jeremiah used his superior size and strength to throw the man into one of the support beams, where he crumpled with a groan. The other 3 outlaws raised their weapons, but Jeremiah was faster. He grabbed his rifle from where he had set it down and fired, hitting one man in the shoulder. The man screamed and dropped his gun. The other 2 hesitated, clearly not expecting this level of resistance. "Get out!" Jeremiah roared, his voice like thunder in the enclosed space. "Get out now, or the next shot is between someone's eyes." The two uninjured outlaws grabbed their wounded companion and the scarred leader, who was dazed but conscious. They dragged them toward the door. "You will regret this," the scarred man spat as they retreated. "We will be back." "I will be waiting," Jeremiah promised darkly. He watched them stumble off into the forest, leaving a trail of blood in the snow. Only when they were out of sight did he lower his rifle, his hands shaking with adrenaline. He rushed back to the cabin and called out to Sarah. "It is safe. They are gone." The bar scraped back, and Sarah emerged with the children. She immediately ran to Jeremiah, throwing her arms around him. "I heard a gunshot. I thought... "I am fine," Jeremiah assured her, holding her tight. "They are gone. I sent them running." "Will they come back?" Sarah asked fearfully. "Maybe," Jeremiah admitted. "But I doubt it. They know I will be ready for them, and they are injured. They will want to get as far from here as possible." That night, Jeremiah did not sleep at all. He sat by the window with his rifle across his lap, watching the darkness for any sign of the outlaws returning. But the night passed quietly, and when dawn broke, there was no sign of the men. Around mid-morning, Sheriff Coleman rode up with his posse. Jeremiah met them outside and explained what had happened. "You are lucky to be alive," the sheriff said grimly. "These are not men to trifle with." "I had my family to protect," Jeremiah said simply. "That makes me more dangerous than any outlaw." The sheriff and his men followed the blood trail into the forest. They returned several hours later with news that they had found the outlaws' camp. 3 of the men were dead, apparently killed by exposure and their wounds. The 4th, the scarred leader, was barely alive. He had been taken into custody and would stand trial for his crimes. "You can rest easy now," Sheriff Coleman told Jeremiah. "They will not be troubling you or anyone else again." After the sheriff left, Jeremiah finally allowed himself to relax. Sarah clung to him, tears of relief streaming down her face. "I was so scared," she whispered. "I thought I was going to lose you." "You did not," Jeremiah said, stroking her hair. "I told you I'm not going anywhere. We are all safe now." The incident with the outlaws seemed to mark a turning point for the family. In the face of real danger, they had all realized how precious their life together was. The small inconveniences and struggles of daily life seemed insignificant compared to the terror of almost losing each other. Sarah threw herself into her teaching with renewed passion, determined to make the most of every day. Jeremiah was more affectionate and present with his children, playing with them and telling them stories more often. Emma and Daniel seemed to sense the change in their parents and responded with increased happiness and security. By the time Christmas arrived, the dark memory of the outlaws had faded into just another story of survival in the harsh frontier. The settlement came together for a Christmas celebration in the schoolhouse, with families bringing food to share and small gifts for the children. Sarah had worked with her students to prepare a Christmas pageant, and Jeremiah watched with pride as Emma recited her lines perfectly, her voice clear and confident. Daniel sat on his lap, watching his sister with wide eyes, while Samuel dozed in Sarah's arms. After the pageant, there was dancing and singing. Jeremiah was not much of a dancer, but he let Sarah pull him onto the floor for one slow song. As they swayed together, Sarah looked up at him with shining eyes. "This is perfect," she said softly. "This life we have built, our children, our home, our community. It is everything I ever dreamed of and more." "The ones we have are plenty," Jeremiah reminded her gently, knowing she still sometimes felt that pang of sadness about not being able to have more children. "They are more than plenty," Sarah agreed. "They are everything. You are everything." Jeremiah leaned down and kissed her, not caring that they were in a room full of people. When they parted, Sarah was blushing, and several of the other women were giggling. "Jeremiah Blackwood, you are incorrigible," Sarah said, but she was smiling. "You love it," he replied with a grin. As winter deepened and the new year of 1877 arrived, life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Sarah continued teaching, and her reputation spread beyond their small settlement. Families from farther away began sending their children to her school, and there was talk of expanding the schoolhouse to accommodate the growing number of students. Jeremiah had become something of a local hero after his encounter with the outlaws. Other men in the settlement sought his advice on hunting and tracking. He found himself becoming more involved in the community, no longer the solitary mountain man who kept to himself. One evening in February, almost exactly a year after Samuel's dramatic birth, Jeremiah and Sarah were sitting by the fire in their mountain cabin. They had come up for the weekend, and the children were all asleep. The wind howled outside, but inside, the cabin was warm and cozy. "Do you ever regret it?" Sarah asked suddenly. "Marrying me and taking on this life?" Jeremiah looked at his wife in surprise. "Where's this coming from?" "I was just thinking about everything that has happened this past year," Sarah said. "The difficult birth, the move to the valley during the week, the outlaws. It has not been easy." "Life is never easy," Jeremiah said. "But that does not mean it is not good. Sarah, I have never regretted marrying you for even a single moment. You have given me purpose and joy and a family. What more could any man want?" "Some men want adventure and excitement," Sarah pointed out. "A quiet life with a wife and 3 children might seem boring." Jeremiah laughed. "Boring? Sarah, in the past year alone, I have delivered a baby, fought off outlaws, learned to braid hair, and figured out how to cook edible meals. That's more adventure than I need." Sarah smiled, but there was still something uncertain in her eyes. "And you truly do not mind that there will be no more children?" Jeremiah set down the piece of wood he had been whittling and moved to sit beside his wife on the bench. He took both of her hands in his. "Listen to me," he said intently. "I'm going to say this one more time, and I need you to truly hear it and believe it. The ones we have are plenty. Emma, Daniel, and Samuel are perfect. You are perfect. Our family is complete. I do not need anything more. I could not ask for anything more. Do you understand?" Sarah nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I understand, and I believe you." "Good," Jeremiah said, pulling her close, "because it is the truth, every word of it." They sat together in silence, listening to the wind and the crackling of the fire. After a while, Sarah spoke again. "Emma asked me yesterday when she would get another little brother or sister," she said quietly. "I did not know what to tell her." "What did you say?" "I told her that some families have many children, and some have just a few, and ours was perfect, just the way it is," Sarah replied. She seemed satisfied with that answer. "That was a good answer," Jeremiah said, "and it is the truth." She also said that she likes being the oldest because it means she gets to help take care of her brothers, Sarah added with a smile. "She's such a serious little thing sometimes, so responsible." "She gets that from you," Jeremiah said. "And Daniel is all you," Sarah laughed, "fearless and always getting into mischief." "What about Samuel?" Jeremiah asked. "What is he going to be?" Sarah considered this. "I think Samuel's going to be a perfect combination of both of us, your strength and my compassion, your determination and my kindness." "A good mix," Jeremiah agreed. They fell silent again, comfortable in each other's presence. After a while, Sarah yawned and leaned her head on Jeremiah's broad shoulder. "I'm tired," she admitted. "Teaching all week and then coming up here on the weekends is exhausting." "Then let us go to bed," Jeremiah suggested. "The children will be up with the sun tomorrow." They banked the fire and made their way to the bedroom, checking on the children as they passed. Emma was curled up on her small bed, her favorite doll clutched in her arms. Daniel had kicked off his blankets and was sprawled across his mattress. Samuel slept peacefully in his cradle, one tiny fist pressed against his mouth. Jeremiah carefully covered Daniel with the blankets again, and Sarah tucked Emma's doll more securely against her daughter's chest. They both gazed down at Samuel for a long moment, watching the gentle rise and fall of his chest. "They are so perfect when they are sleeping," Sarah whispered. "They are pretty perfect when they are awake too," Jeremiah replied. "Just louder?" Sarah stifled a laugh and led her husband to their own bed. As they lay together in the darkness, Sarah snuggled against Jeremiah's side, her head resting on his chest. "Thank you," she murmured sleepily. "For what?" "For being exactly who you are, for loving me and our children so completely, for making me believe that we are enough." Jeremiah pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "You never have to thank me for that. It is the easiest thing I have ever done." Within minutes, Sarah was asleep, her breathing deep and even. Jeremiah lay awake a while longer, listening to his family sleeping around him. 3 children and a wife he loved more than life itself. A home in the mountains and a place in the community. A purpose and a future. "The ones we have are plenty," he thought again. "More than plenty. They are everything." As spring arrived once more, bringing green grass and wildflowers to the mountain meadows, The Blackwood family continued to thrive. Emma was reading at a level far beyond her 6 years, devouring every book Sarah could get her hands on. Daniel was exploring the world with endless curiosity and energy, and Samuel was sitting up on his own and babbling constantly, his cheerful personality making everyone smile. Sarah's school had become so successful that the settlement decided to build a larger schoolhouse to accommodate all the students. Jeremiah helped with the construction, his strength and skill with an axe making him invaluable to the project. One warm May afternoon, as Jeremiah was working on the roof of the new schoolhouse, Tom Sullivan climbed up to join him. "You have done well for yourself, Jeremiah," Tom said, looking out over the growing settlement. "A beautiful wife, healthy children, and the respect of everyone here. That is more than most men can say." "I am a lucky man," Jeremiah agreed, driving a nail into a beam with one powerful swing of his hammer. "There's talk of bringing in a doctor to set up a practice here," Tom continued. "The settlement is growing fast. Before long, this will be a proper town." "Progress," Jeremiah said neutrally. Tom laughed. "You do not sound enthusiastic about that." "I came to the mountains to get away from towns and crowds," Jeremiah admitted. "But I understand the value of having a doctor nearby, especially with children, and Sarah loves teaching. I will not take that away from her just because I prefer solitude." "That is what makes you a good husband," Tom said. "You put your family's needs above your own preferences." "It is not a sacrifice," Jeremiah said. "Their happiness is my happiness. That is how it should be." That evening, Jeremiah returned to their cabin in the settlement to find Sarah in a state of excitement. She had received a letter from her aunt back in Pennsylvania, the first communication with her family in over 6 years. "She wants to visit," Sarah said, waving the letter. "This summer. She says she wants to meet you and the children." "That is wonderful," Jeremiah said, though he felt a twinge of nervousness. He had never met any of Sarah's family, and he wondered what they would think of him. He was not exactly a refined gentleman. "She also says that my cousin is getting married and wants me to be there," Sarah continued. "The wedding is in August. Oh, Jeremiah, I know it is a long way to travel, but I would love to see my family again. It has been so long." Jeremiah saw the longing in his wife's eyes and knew what he had to do. "Then we will go," he said firmly. "All of us. It will be an adventure." Sarah's face lit up with joy. "Truly? But the expense and the distance—" "We will manage," Jeremiah assured her. "You have not seen your family in years. They should meet their nieces and nephews, and I should meet the people who raised the woman I love." Sarah threw her arms around his neck. "Have I told you lately that you are the best man in the entire world?" "You may have mentioned it," Jeremiah said with a smile, "but I never get tired of hearing it." The next few months were spent preparing for the journey east. It would take weeks to travel to Pennsylvania, and they would need to be gone for at least 2 months to make the trip worthwhile. Sarah arranged for another teacher to take over her classes for the fall term. Jeremiah sold enough furs to pay for the train tickets and traveling expenses. They packed carefully, trying to anticipate everything they might need. In late June, the Blackwood family left their mountain home and headed to the nearest train station in Denver. It was the first time Emma and Daniel had ever been in a city, and their eyes were wide with wonder at all the people and buildings. Samuel was too young to understand what was happening, but he seemed to enjoy all the new sights and sounds. The train journey was long and exhausting, but also exciting. They traveled across the plains, through the Midwest, and finally into Pennsylvania. When they arrived in the small town where Sarah's aunt lived, they were met at the station by a woman who looked remarkably like an older version of Sarah. "Aunt Margaret!" Sarah exclaimed, rushing forward to embrace her. "Oh, my dear girl," Aunt Margaret said, tears streaming down her face. "Let me look at you. You are just as beautiful as ever." She turned her attention to Jeremiah, taking in his massive frame, long hair, and weathered features. For a moment, Jeremiah worried that she would find him too rough and uncivilized, but then Aunt Margaret smiled warmly. "So you were the man who stole my niece's heart and took her away to the wild frontier," she said. "I can see why Sarah fell in love with you. You look like you could protect her from anything." "That's my job, ma'am," Jeremiah said, relaxing slightly, "and my privilege." "And these must be the children," Aunt Margaret exclaimed, bending down to greet Emma, Daniel, and baby Samuel. "Oh, they are precious, simply precious." The visit to Pennsylvania was wonderful in many ways. Sarah's family welcomed Jeremiah and the children with open arms. They stayed in Aunt Margaret's large house, and there were constant gatherings with cousins and other relatives. Emma loved meeting all her extended family, and Daniel enjoyed playing with the other children. But Jeremiah also felt out of place in the crowded, civilized East. The towns were too big, the people too numerous. He missed the open spaces and clean air of the mountains. He missed his cabin and his traplines and the simple life they had built. Sarah seemed to sense his discomfort. One evening, as they walked together in Aunt Margaret's garden while the children played nearby, she took his hand. "You hate it here," she said softly. "Ajat, I do not hate it," Jeremiah protested. "Your family is wonderful, and I am glad we came." "But you miss home," Sarah finished. "I can see it in your eyes." Jeremiah sighed. "I do. Is that terrible of me? Your family has been so welcoming, and you are so happy to be here." "It is not terrible," Sarah assured him. "It just shows how different our lives are now from what I left behind. I love seeing my family, but I've realized something these past few weeks." "What is that?" "Colorado is my home now," Sarah said. "That cabin in the mountains, the settlement, our life there. That is where I belong, with you and our children in the place we have built together. This is nice for a visit, but it is not home anymore." Jeremiah felt relief wash over him. "I'm glad to hear you say that. I was worried you might want to stay." "Never," Sarah said firmly. "My life is with you, wherever that may be." The wedding of Sarah's cousin was a grand affair, with more people than Jeremiah had ever seen in one place. He wore a suit that had been borrowed from one of Sarah's cousins, and he felt stiff and uncomfortable in the formal clothing. But Sarah looked beautiful in a new dress Aunt Margaret had insisted on buying for her, and Jeremiah forgot his discomfort as he watched her smile and laugh with her family. After the wedding, as they prepared to return to Colorado, Aunt Margaret pulled Sarah aside for a private conversation. When Sarah rejoined Jeremiah, she had tears in her eyes. "What is wrong?" Jeremiah asked with concern. "Nothing is wrong," Sarah said, wiping her eyes. "Aunt Margaret just told me how proud she is of me. She said she can see how happy I am and how much you love me and the children. She said I made the right choice in following my heart to Colorado." "You did make the right choice," Jeremiah said, pulling her close. "And I thank God every day that you got into that wagon and headed west." The journey home to Colorado felt twice as long as the journey east had been. All of them were eager to return to their mountain home. When the train finally pulled into Denver and they began the last leg of their journey up into the Rockies, Jeremiah felt his spirit lift. When they finally arrived at their cabin in late August, the sun was setting behind the peaks, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Jeremiah carried the sleeping Samuel inside, while Sarah led Emma and Daniel, who were too tired to do more than stumble through the door. "We are home," Sarah said with a happy sigh, looking around at the familiar log walls and simple furnishings. "We are home," Jeremiah agreed, and it felt like the truest thing he had ever said. The fall term started shortly after their return, and Sarah threw herself back into teaching with renewed energy. The new schoolhouse was beautiful, large enough for all her students with room to spare. Jeremiah had finished the work on their own cabin during the summer before they left, adding a small addition so that Emma could have her own room. Daniel and Samuel would share the other small bedroom until they were older. As the year wound down toward winter, Jeremiah found himself reflecting on how much their lives had changed in the 2 years since Samuel's birth. The crisis that had seemed so devastating at the time had actually brought them closer together. Sarah had found her true calling as a teacher. He had become more connected to the community. Their children were healthy and happy. One snowy evening in December, as they celebrated Samuel's second birthday with a small cake Sarah had baked, Jeremiah looked around at his family and felt overwhelming gratitude. Emma was helping Daniel blow out the candles on the cake. Samuel was clapping his hands with delight, not really understanding what was happening but enjoying the excitement. Sarah was smiling, her face glowing in the candlelight. "What are you thinking about?" Sarah asked, noticing his expression. "Just how perfect this is," Jeremiah said. "How perfect all of you are." "Even when Daniel put a frog in Emma's shoe yesterday," Sarah teased. "Even then," Jeremiah confirmed. After the children were in bed, Jeremiah and Sarah sat together by the fire, as they did most evenings. Sarah was mending one of Daniel's shirts that he had torn climbing a tree. Jeremiah was working on carving a small horse for Samuel's birthday. "Mrs. Henderson stopped by the schoolhouse yesterday," Sarah said casually. Jeremiah looked up. They had not seen the midwife much since Samuel's birth, though she still lived in the settlement. "She asked how we were doing," Sarah continued, "how Samuel was growing. And then she said something interesting." "What was that?" "She said she had been wrong," Sarah said, setting down her mending. "About what she told you after Samuel was born." Jeremiah frowned. "What do you mean, wrong?" "She said that she had been so focused on the medical aspects, on the danger and the trauma, that she had not considered the emotional and spiritual side of things. She said that she had worried that you would resent me for not being able to give you more children, or that I would feel incomplete. But she can see now that we are happy, that our family is whole. She wanted to apologize for causing us so much worry and sadness." "She had nothing to apologize for," Jeremiah said. "She saved your life." "I know," Sarah agreed. "But I think she felt badly about the way she delivered the news. She said she should have focused more on the blessing of the 3 healthy children we have, rather than on what we could not have in the future." "The ones we have are plenty," Jeremiah said, repeating the words that had become something of a mantra for them. "More than plenty," Sarah added with a smile. They fell into comfortable silence again, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the occasional creak of the cabin settling. Outside, snow was falling gently, blanketing the world in white. "Jeremiah," Sarah said after a while. "Yes? I want you to know that I am truly happy, completely and utterly happy. Sometimes I still have moments when I feel that old sadness about not being able to have more children. But those moments are rare now, and they pass quickly. Because I look at what we have, and I realize that we have everything that matters." Jeremiah set down his carving and moved to sit beside his wife on the bench. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. "I am happy too," he said simply. "Happier than I ever thought possible. You gave me a family, Sarah. You gave me a home and a purpose. You gave me love. That is more than any man deserves, and more than I ever dared to hope for." Sarah tilted her face up to kiss him, and Jeremiah marveled again at how this small, fierce woman had completely changed his life. He had been a solitary mountain man, content with his traps and his hunting and his isolation, but she had shown him that there was more to life than mere survival. She had shown him joy and laughter and love. "What do you think our children will be when they grow up?" Sarah asked dreamily, settling back against his chest. "Emma will probably be a teacher like her mother," Jeremiah said. "She loves learning and helping others." "And Daniel will be a mountain man like his father," Sarah added with a laugh, "unless we can convince him to do something that does not involve climbing things and getting dirty." "What about Samuel?" "Samuel could be anything," Sarah said. "He is still so young, but I think he will be something special, something that combines the best of both of us." "All our children are special," Jeremiah said firmly. "Each one of them is a miracle." The winter passed peacefully, with the usual challenges of cold weather and isolation, but also with the warmth of family and community. Jeremiah continued to hunt and trap, Sarah continued to teach, and the children continued to grow and learn. In the spring of 1878, the settlement officially incorporated as the town of Silver Valley, acknowledging its growth and development. There was a celebration with food and music and speeches from the town leaders. Jeremiah and Sarah attended with their children, feeling proud to be part of this growing community. During the celebration, the mayor announced that the town council had voted to name the new schoolhouse after Sarah in recognition of her dedication to educating the children of Silver Valley. Sarah was stunned. "I do not deserve such an honor," she protested. "You absolutely do," the mayor insisted. "You have transformed the children of this town. You have given them knowledge and opportunity. You have earned this recognition." When the sign was unveiled, reading Blackwood School, Sarah burst into tears. Emma hugged her mother tightly, and Daniel tugged on Jeremiah's sleeve. "Papa, why is Mama crying?" he asked with concern. "Because she is happy," Jeremiah explained. "Sometimes people cry when they are very, very happy." "That is silly," Daniel pronounced. Jeremiah laughed and ruffled his son's hair. "You will understand when you are older." That evening, back at their cabin, Sarah was still overwhelmed by the honor. "I never imagined anything like this," she said to Jeremiah. "When I came west, I just wanted to teach. I never thought I would make such a difference." "You have made a difference in so many lives," Jeremiah told her, "in mine most of all. You took a rough mountain man and turned him into a husband and father. That is pretty impressive." "You were always those things," Sarah said. "I just helped you see it." As the months continued to pass, life in Silver Valley and in the Blackwood household settled into a comfortable routine. Emma was 7 now and reading at an advanced level, helping her mother with the younger students at school. Daniel was 4 and full of mischief and energy, constantly exploring and getting into trouble. Samuel was 2.5, talking in full sentences and displaying a sunny disposition that made everyone love him. Jeremiah and Sarah had found their rhythm as partners, working together to manage their family and their home. They still spent weekends at their mountain cabin, which remained their true home, but they also appreciated the community and connections they had built in town. One summer evening, as they sat on the porch of their mountain cabin watching the sun set over the peaks, Sarah leaned her head on Jeremiah's shoulder. "Do you remember what you said to me after Samuel was born?" she asked. "I said a lot of things," Jeremiah replied. "Which particular thing are you remembering?" "You said, 'The ones we have are plenty,' and you have said it many times since then. And I have meant it every single time." "I know you have," Sarah said, "and I want you to know that I finally, truly believe it, not just in my head but in my heart. Our family is complete. Our life is full. We have everything we need." Jeremiah turned to look at his wife, seeing the peace and contentment in her face. "I am glad," he said softly, "because it is the absolute truth." They sat together in the fading light, listening to the sound of their children playing inside the cabin. Emma was reading a story to her brothers, her voice rising and falling dramatically as she acted out the different characters. Daniel was making sound effects, and Samuel was giggling at his siblings' antics. "Listen to them," Sarah said with a smile. "They are so happy." "They are loved," Jeremiah said. "That is why they are happy. They know they are safe and loved and wanted." "Because of you," Sarah said. "Because you have shown them what a good father looks like, what a good man looks like." "And because you have shown them what a good mother looks like," Jeremiah countered, "what kindness and strength and intelligence look like. They are lucky to have you." "We are all lucky to have each other," Sarah said. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Jeremiah reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From that first meeting in the mountain storm, to the building of their cabin, to the birth of their 3 children, to all the challenges and triumphs they had faced together. "I love you, Sarah Blackwood," he said, the words coming easily now after years of marriage, "more today than yesterday, and more tomorrow than today." "I love you too, Jeremiah Blackwood," Sarah replied, "forever and always." They sat together until the children called for them to come inside, and then they rose and went to tuck their 3 precious children into bed. As Jeremiah listened to Sarah sing a lullaby to Samuel, he thought again about Mrs. Henderson's words from 2 years ago. She cannot have more children. At the time, those words had felt like a death sentence, like a loss of something precious. But now, Jeremiah understood that they had actually been a gift. They had forced him and Sarah to appreciate what they had, rather than always reaching for more. They had made them focus on the quality of their family life, rather than the quantity of their children. They had brought them closer together and strengthened their love. "The ones we have are plenty," Jeremiah thought one more time. And in that moment, with his wife singing softly in the next room and his 3 children safe and warm in their beds, he knew with absolute certainty that it was true. Time continued to move forward, as it always does. Emma grew into a young woman who loved learning as much as her mother did, eventually becoming a teacher herself. Daniel grew into a strong, capable young man who loved the mountains and the outdoor life, following in his father's footsteps as a guide and hunter. Samuel grew into a thoughtful, kind young man who combined the best qualities of both his parents, eventually becoming a doctor who served the people of Silver Valley and the surrounding areas. But those were stories for later years. For now, in this moment of 1878, they were simply a family. A mountain man, his wife, and their 3 children, living in the Colorado Rockies and building a life together filled with love and laughter and purpose. Years later, when people would ask Jeremiah Blackwood about his life, He would always say the same thing. He would talk about his beautiful wife, Sarah, who had taught him what love truly meant. He would talk about his 3 children, each perfect in their own way, each a blessing beyond measure. He would talk about the life they had built together in the mountains, the community they had helped establish, the legacy they had created. And when people would occasionally ask if he ever regretted not having more children, Jeremiah would smile and shake his head. "The ones we have are plenty," he would say, "more than plenty. They are everything." And he would mean every word, because it was the absolute truth. Some families are large and boisterous, filled with many children and constant activity. Some families are small and quiet, with just a few members who love each other deeply. But the measure of a family is not in its size but in its love, not in quantity but in quality. The Blackwood family was complete. They had faced challenges and overcome them. They had built a life together through hard work and dedication. They had loved each other through good times and bad. And in the end, that was all that mattered. As the sun set over the Colorado Rockies on that summer evening in 1878, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Jeremiah Blackwood stood on the porch of his mountain cabin with his arm around his wife and watched their 3 children play in the meadow. And he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that he was the luckiest man alive. The ones we have are plenty, more than plenty. They are everything, and they always would be, for all the days of his life.